All right, well, thank you all for joining us today. I'm Samantha Graham with the Ban and Sea Initiative at the Institute for Emerging Issues. On with us today, too, is Kylie Foley, who works with us at Ban and Sea, and Colin Fox. Today, we're going to be talking about the digital skill divide, the report that was done by the Digital Skills Coalition. We're going to do an overview and then kind of talk about what this work looks like on the ground, especially here at NC State University. To our agenda for today includes we're going to give a brief overview of IEI and the Band and C program, and then just some place setting on what digital inclusion looks like, some key terms, and then we'll hear from Amanda with the Digital Skills Coalition. Then we'll do some Q&A panel with Michelle from NC State, and then we'll talk about some upcoming opportunities for everyone to get involved in digital inclusion planning around the state. We'd like to thank our sponsors, the NC Electric Cooperatives and CoBank, for sponsoring our webinar series. So the Institute for Emerging Issues, the goal is we connect North Carolinians across sectors, regions, and perspectives for collaborative work on key emerging issues affecting our state's future economic competitiveness. We've had forums since 1986, and we've done year-round work since 2002. Our last forum was on Talent First Economics in February, and you can find more information about that forum on our website. Out of one of the forums in 2020, right before the pandemic, was reconnecting to technological opportunity, and the Band and C program was started. Band and C stands for Building a New Digital Economy in North Carolina, and our goal is to make North Carolina the first state in the nation where every county has a digital inclusion plan. A digital inclusion plan is a community strategic plan that addresses the components of digital inclusion and works to close the digital divide. We've been working for over 3 years now with counties and regions across North Carolina, and here's a map of where digital inclusion plan stands right now. Green counties have a plan adopted, yellow counties are in progress, and blue have plans that were independently funded, but we're still aware of the plans, and we partner with those writers as well. A lot of these plans can be found on our website on our resources page. Kylie just put that in the chat. Thank you. We want to make sure that you're all aware of the upcoming listening sessions from the statewide BEAD and digital equity programs. Right now is someone in Fayetteville, so you're not there, but Kylie just put the link into the chat on where to register, and make sure you share this with others. They want to hear, especially from priority populations. Those are included here in small text, but aging individuals, immigrants, individuals who live in households at or below 150% of the poverty level, individuals with disabilities, language barriers, English learners and low levels of literacy, members of a racial or ethnic minority group, and individuals who primarily reside in a rural area, incarcerated, LGBTQI people, and veterans. We want to thank our sponsors and our partners again. These are the folks that are really helping drive this work through our programming, and we, again, couldn't do it without our partners. So to do some place setting on what digital inclusion is and why we're here and the work that we do, we're going to take some terminology from our friends at the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, talk about the digital divide is the issue, digital equity is the goal, and digital inclusion is the work. And what we mean by the digital divide is that it's the gap between those who have affordable access, skills, and support to effectively engage online and those who do not. Technology is constantly evolving, and what the digital divide means to me may not be what it means to you. The digital divide prevents equal participation and opportunity in all parts of life, and it disproportionately affects people of color, Indigenous peoples, households of low income, people with disability, rural areas, and older adults. So what is digital equity? Access and adoption is what we mean by digital equity. It's a condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our society, democracy, and the economy. It's important to note that equity versus equality, when we use the term equity, we accurately acknowledge the systematic barriers that must be dismantled before achieving equality for all. So part of digital equity is the skills to know how to use the internet. So we want to, you've heard us reference the National Digital Skills The National Skills Coalition's report was released in February, and it's all about the digital skill divide. Kylie, in our last webinar, reviewed some of the important findings, including why addressing the digital skill divide is central to racial and educational equity. We're grateful that North Carolina was one of the case studies mentioned, and our team learned a lot about the data specific to our state. We're so honored to have one of the report's authors, Amanda Bergson-Shilcock, with us today to share key findings from the report. She is a senior fellow at the National Skills Coalition, where she leads the organization's work on adult education and workforce policies to expand opportunities for US-born and immigrant adults. Her work has been featured in Time, Fortune, BBC News, Inside Higher Ed, Politico, Business Insider, The Wall Street Journal, HR Dive, and many others. After Amanda shares, we'll have Michelle Healy from NC State University join us to discuss how addressing the digital skill divide looks on the ground. At the end of our webinar today, we'll have time for questions, so please put them in the chat for us to ask later. And please join me in welcoming Amanda.
Thanks so much. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I'm Amanda Bergson-Shilcock, and I'm especially excited to be talking to folks in North Carolina because you all have really taken this report and run with it. I've had some really rewarding conversations with state officials, with rural leaders, with workforce folks, adult educators who have really taken some of these findings to heart. If this is new to you, I have good news. We're going to walk through some of these findings today, and you will have these slides to refer back to later. So if you're the kind of person that really likes to take notes and you feel like information is going by too quickly, good news, you'll have these to consult at your leisure, and you can share them with any colleagues who may not have been able to join us today. So let's sort of go over what my next 15 or 20 minutes is going to focus on. I'm going to share with you some information about National Skills Coalition's new report, talk about what those findings mean for North Carolina advocates, and what's next in taking action. If you're not already familiar with my organization, we're a nonprofit, big tent bipartisan coalition of workforce boards, community colleges, nonprofit organizations, adult education providers, labor management training partnerships, chambers of commerce, really anyone with an interest in workforce development, particularly jobs that require skills training past high school, but not necessarily a four-year degree. We are a foundation and donation funded organization. We don't apply for public funding because that allows us to stay independent in making policy recommendations to government. So that means we won't be competing for any Digital Equity Act funds at the state or federal level. So let's just talk about something that I suspect many of you know already. The digital divide is very much not just about broadband, high-speed internet access, or the digital device you may have, but very much also about the skills that you have that enable you to use those tools effectively. We know from other research, including work done by John Horrigan, who some of you may know, that when you have higher digital skills, you're more likely to take advantage of programs like the Affordable Connectivity Program that can help you get high-speed internet at home. And we know from people telling us themselves over and over again that one of the reasons that people most often give for enrolling in digital skills classes is that they want to get a job or they want to get a better job. And so with that piece of information in mind, National Skills Coalition decided last year to research what employers were really saying in their help wanted ads about what kind of digital skills they needed. There have been lots of other reports on digital skills, but most of them are forward-looking, right? So they're projections or they're guesses or they're speculations about, oh, we think these skills will be popular in the future, or we think this job is growing. This is a real-time look at the labor market, right? Our report looked at 43 million help wanted ads that were published during 2021, and we analyzed them in collaboration with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. Now, I'm obligated to tell you that the opinions expressed in this report reflect those of the authors, that's me, and do not necessarily reflect those of the Federal Reserve System or the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. I know you all understand that disclaimer. So we looked at these 43 million ads, given that each ad has about 8 skills associated with it, and there are about 15,000 distinct skills across all those jobs, we hand coded those skills to understand whether they were definitely, likely, or not digital. So definitely digital is kind of obvious, right? Not surprising. Things like Microsoft Excel or the Python programming language. Likely digital are things like bookkeeping, right? You can do bookkeeping with paper and pencil using a ledger, but most people these days are doing it using a software product like QuickBooks or even just good old Excel. And then there are some not digital skills, things like mopping floors or changing diapers for elder care or childcare workers, that sort of thing. So here's our key take-home finding. 92% of jobs in the US require definitely or likely digital skills. And the numbers in North Carolina are very close to the national average. So North Carolina is in orange here, the national numbers in gray. You can see that they're almost completely identical. We know that there's a lot of different kinds of skills that fall under the big umbrella that's called digital skills or technology skills. So I want to just share a couple of examples of these. And I ask that all of you kind of imagine not only in your own work, but in your own daily lives, right? If you stop at a convenience store in the morning to get a cup of coffee, if your child's teacher is trying to communicate with you using an app, right? What are all the ways that technology is showing up and all the workers in your life that are needing to use that technology? So we interviewed one construction company that told us the average frontline construction worker needs to use 3 to 5 mobile apps every day, right? They're a specialty contractor. They sub for general contractors on building jobs all over the state that they work in. And their frontline workers are often folks who don't speak English as a first language, who might not have gone past high school in their education, but they have to be comfortable not only using things like Zoom or Teams or basic email, but also being able to use the construction apps that they have to be able to snap a picture on a building job, submit a work order change or an RFI to the general contractor, right? So not construction, not necessarily a field where we think of folks needing lots of technology, but one where it's increasingly showing up. Collaborative robots, cobots, really important in advanced manufacturing. The price on these things has dropped enormously. We interviewed one company that told us that a cobot that used to cost $1 million just a few years ago now costs $180,000. When the robot price drops that fast, then companies are more likely to purchase them. The robot ends up taking over the heavy-duty, difficult parts of the task, and the human has to become accustomed to managing, supervising, and troubleshooting the robot. I've got another example of this coming up in just a minute. Of course, telehealth. We all saw during the pandemic that telehealth really grew and has not gone away, even as the pandemic has transitioned into its next phase. And even medical office reception desk staff who used to be in charge of checking people in person are now often helping either patients or doctors themselves troubleshoot and navigate the telehealth apps that they have to use. Ag is a huge area of use of technology. I know there are folks from NC State Extension on today's webinar, and some of them have already taken this report and run with it. So shout out to them for having engaged so early with this. But there's in-cab technology on tractors and combine harvesters. There's industrial Internet of Things technology, like sensors that are used in grain silos to detect pressure or moisture or other factors, temperature, that could impact whether the grain gets moldy or becomes useless, and a whole host of other ways that we're seeing technology show up in the ag sector. This is that other example of cobots that I told you about. So we think of food processing, meat packing as being cold, messy work. It is, but it's also increasingly technological work. These workers used to have jobs where they were lifting 40-pound boxes of frozen meat on a regular basis. Now the robot is lifting the boxes. The humans are using the HMI, the human machine interface. That's that screen that you see on the right-hand side of this picture. And they are not just supervising the robot, but also troubleshooting it, right? Sometimes the robot, there's too much air in the box, the robot thinks the box is empty, then the human has to step in and troubleshoot that, right? One of the workers, and this is not a stock photo, this is actually from a real example. She's 62 years old. Her name is Marisol. She doesn't read fluently in any language, but she has stepped up and become the main troubleshooter and robot sort of supervisor in the organization, right? So we see this happening with workers in a huge range of industry sectors. And of course, warehousing and logistics. Many of you work in TDL, transportation, distribution, logistics, order picking, and other kinds of software tools increasingly common. Aerospace, an industry where augmented reality is big. You may think you've never heard of AR, but it's actually something as common as using a silly photo app on your phone, maybe a Snapchat filter, or if you've ever shopped at a furniture store like IKEA and used their app to try out what furniture might look like in your home. Same general idea, right? You're aiming your phone, your computer at something in the real world, and the camera is showing you that thing in the real world, but it's layering an animation or an image on top of that. And in this case, it's aircraft assembly workers working on engine assembly using augmented reality. So the big takeaway from this is digital skills aren't just about people who have white-collar office jobs. It's everybody these days. Our research found that even jobs that call for 0 to 2 years of experience overwhelmingly need digital skills. Even jobs that require a high school diploma or an associate's degree as the highest level of education still overwhelmingly require digital skills. And we had earlier research that found a lot of workers were kind of spending a huge amount of time and energy covering for or compensating for their digital skill gaps. So that's another factor that's going on here, right? People are often spending a lot of time trying to deal with the fact that they're facing these digital skill demands, but not always being given the support they need to build those skills. A lot of folks assume, oh, this might be a problem with the calendar. As soon as older workers retire, then we won't have any digital skills needs in the workforce. That's not true. First of all, it's not fair to older workers, many of whom are very comfortable with technology. But second of all, it overestimates younger workers. A lot of them are perfectly comfortable using their phones to text or create a social media video. That does not mean they're comfortable using electronic medical record software, creating a budget spreadsheet, working with a cobot. Workers of every age need the opportunity to build from the skills they have to the skills they need. And we can see that people need both foundational skills and industry-specific skills. And I'll give some examples of those in just a moment. We also see that there's a pretty noticeable increase if you move from a job that requires no digital skills to a job that requires one digital skill. On average, your median hourly wage will rise by 23%. That's a huge jump. Anybody would notice that difference in their paycheck. And of course, as the wages go up, people are typically contributing more in federal and state tax revenue. We know that small businesses, which are the two at the top of the chart here, that post between 1 and 50 job ads a year, have almost as high a demand for digital skills as larger businesses. The difference is that if you're a big company, you can run your own in-house training program. If you are a small or mid-sized business, you are depending on your community-based organizations, your adult education partners, your workforce system partners, to help you build that talent pipeline of workers. So let's talk a little bit more about North Carolina's demand, and then I'll wrap up and we can move to the next part of this conversation. So we know that North Carolina businesses want workers with a really strong base of foundational skills. And I mentioned before that I was going to talk about what foundational and industry specific meant. These are some foundational skills, right? And they're pretty common sense. If you saw these in a job ad, you'd probably have a good handle on what this meant, right? Can they do basic typing, basic data entry, comfortable scanning barcodes, basic internet skills? Can they use basic office software? Not a surprise, right? But again, overwhelmingly, workers don't just need these skills, they also need industry-specific skills. And that can vary pretty dramatically. So in the finance sector in North Carolina, there's really high demand for experience with mobile banking, electronic wire transfer. SQL, that's SQL or structured query language, that's a programming language. Healthcare, again, electronic medical records show up a lot, billing systems. Manufacturing, ERP is huge, enterprise resource planning software, robotics. And then we have a couple old favorites, right? Those of you who've been in manufacturing for a while are like, yeah, CNC, PLC, these have been around for a long time, but they keep evolving, right? And the digital skills associated with them keep evolving. Retail, you might be surprised, I certainly was, that robotics showed up so high in the retail sector, but definitely something that North Carolina is one of a number of states nationwide where we're seeing that shift. And Yardi is property management software that we see a lot in the real estate sector. Right, so those are some examples of industry-specific skills. So as advocates, as educators, as digital inclusion and equity folks, what can you actually do with this information that I've just shared with you? Well, there's a lot you can do to help inform your local digital equity planning, your state digital equity planning and work. In particular, advocating to make sure that digital equity and BEAD funding in North Carolina is invested in digital skills, right? Yes, high-speed internet is important. Yes, digital devices are important. But if we just give people broadband and devices and we don't give them skills, we are really doing a disservice to all the goals and aspirations that they have for themselves and their families and to the needs of the broader economy. You can also combine the findings in our study with census data to figure out how you might work to target equity gaps for covered populations under the law. Some of you have already read the detailed North Carolina profile that was part of our report, but we have information on each one of the 8 covered populations. And I've got a couple of charts here, including this is around low-income households, veterans, people with English language barriers. And when you see the industries where folks are working, that can give you a hint about where you might focus some of the digital skills investments to make sure that you're helping to close some of those equity gaps. Another thing that can happen through digital equity and broadband folks is to collaborate with state labor and education officials to make sure that other investments that and are making are really amplifying and supporting the digital equity work that so many of you are engaged with on the ground right now. Some states have made sure that digital skills are spelled out as an eligible activity for other state workforce funding. So for example, if there's a job training program for incumbent workers where employers can apply for grants to upskill their existing workforce. And some states are focusing on industry sector partnerships that bring together small business owners who are really interested in supporting digital upskilling. There's lots of different levers you can lean on. Some of these might be very far away from the work that your organization does. Some of these might be a perfect fit. And so I'm hoping that we'll have time later in the program to sort of delve into what is ringing true to you in this data, what stands out as a question or something you're skeptical about. But I know we have some other really, really valuable homegrown North Carolina expertise to hear from. So let me turn things back over to our colleagues at NC State to move on to the next part of our conversation.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was really helpful. And please put your questions for Amanda in the chat, and we'll be sure to get to those in just a little bit. We do want to ground your research and some of our work in North Carolina. I'll get us started with some questions, and then we'll open it up to the group. If you have something you want to ask Amanda, Michelle, or Ban and C, please put it in the chat. Along with Amanda, we're happy to be joined by Michelle Healy, who's the Business Services Coordinator with NC State University's Department of Horticultural Science and is the chair of the Employee Experience and Relations Committee of the Staff Senate. NC State Staff Senate has taken on a digital access and inclusion project. It's important knowing that they estimate up to 800 staff members don't use digital skills as part of their job, but knowing the university system uses digital resources for job training, payroll, updates, and employee assistance programs. So to Michelle, to get us started, after hearing the national landscape of the digital skill divide from Amanda's report, it seems that North Carolina state universities face some of the same challenges as other workers. 30% of staff do not speak English as their primary language, and 32% of survey respondents who reported they do not have regular or convenient access to digital technology at work. Why has this been a top priority for the Staff Senate?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you today. The Staff Senate represents staff, and we represent all staff. And this came as a concern through the senators that work in the units where people do not routinely interact with technology. And so that came as a concern, and it was acted on by the Staff Senate. And as we got our arms around the scale of the problem, we began to look at potential solutions, what we could do as a Senate, what we might ask others to do. And because we are the voice for our staff, that is why we've embraced this and are continuing to look at the issue.
Thank you. As Amanda's report shared nationally and from North Carolina, there's a correlation between the quantity of digital skills a worker has and their income. The Senate survey found that many of the universities, typically lower paid workers in dining, housekeeping, and groundskeeping services, are the ones with the lowest access to technology and training to use it. How are the recommendations the Senate released aiming to address the inequitable digital skill divide on our campus?
Yes.
Loaded.
If the Staff Senate had a budget, we would solve it. What I would say is that we have put forward a plan to hire a digital navigator. And we did check with our onboarding staff here at NC State. And we did find in questioning that they are at capacity and can't really take on additional initiatives. And that's, fine. And so we've moved on and are knocking on the door of our OIT, Office of Information Technology Department. We have buy-in from the director, Dr. Mark Hoyt, and we believe we may be able to house that position there. Now we're looking for some funding, but we do have the description and we do have a unit that is willing to host that position. And we would like to move that forward with one-time funding proof of concept.
That's amazing. That's great news. Okay, Amanda, one of the most impactful results of your report was that if a worker who was previously in a job that requires 0 digital skills was able to move into a job that required a definite digital skill, their hourly wage would rise 25% or more than $8,000 per year for median hourly wage workers. Many of our partners are trying to teach their local governments, businesses, schools, and nonprofits why investing in digital equity is as important as digital access, the infrastructure we spoke about earlier. What parts of your report do you think are also impactful for making the case for investing in workers' digital skills?
Thank you so much for that question, Sam. We have some really cool data in this report, and the most helpful thing I can say to you is please steal my charts and graphs. We warmly invite you to copy them, paste them into your grant proposals, paste them in your public presentations. If you're in a job where you talk to the media or journalists, please give them to the journalists, let them know they're free to reprint them. And I'm actually going to share just a couple of infographics on the screen here, just so folks can see 1 or 2 factoids that might be really useful. And while I'm doing that, I just want to emphasize 2 things that Michelle and her team are doing that are so important that, frankly, I wish more places around the country were doing. And the first is really just getting a baseline, asking what's actually going on with workers at all levels to understand how technology is showing up in their jobs and what their needs are. You'd be surprised at the number of large institutions and others that have not yet asked that question. And then the second thing is to get creative about trying to address the needs and the questions that folks are raising, particularly for frontline staff in cafeteria jobs or cleaning jobs or other roles like that. So just briefly in terms of charts and graphs you can steal, and I'll be sharing all of these publicly so you can download them from the Band NC website. You can use them in your presentation. This chart, 92% of jobs require digital skills. Really nice factoid to share. This is from our earlier research. A third of the US workforce needs foundational digital skills. And businesses need entry-level workers, folks with 0 to 2 years of experience to have these skills, right? We also have this one last chart, which I'll share on digital skills pay more, right? So this is the longer version of the fact that I shared earlier about the 23% hourly wage increase. As you get to jobs that require 3, 5, 7, 9 different digital skills, that keeps going up. And some of you might be thinking, but Amanda, how many jobs really require 9 different digital skills? And the answer is 2.1 million across the United States. So it's more than you think. So thanks, Samantha, for letting me share a couple of those infographics. And again, they'll be publicly available, and I warmly encourage all of you to steal these charts and graphs and use them widely.
Thank you so much. And Kenny actually put in the chat, Kenny Sharon from Cooperative Extension, that they're on the verge of launching a digital skills education effort by hiring 15 digital skills educators. This report will help sell the justification for these positions. So thank you, Kenny. So of course, we're so thankful that North Carolina was a case study for your report, with 91% of job postings in 2021 required a definitely or likely digital skill. So Amanda, based on your research, what would be some guidance you would give to a North Carolina digital inclusion partner based on the report's overall recommendations?
I think the first thing is, I can't tell you what's going to fly with the local audience you're trying to talk to. Right? If your role is to talk to your local chamber of commerce, they're going to be interested in different things than if your role is to talk to your local public library. If your role is to work directly with community members who are building digital skills, then you might need different information than if your role is to write grant proposals or to write public articles about this work. My hope, though, is that everything in this report will have some nuggets that, regardless of your role, you can borrow and use as part of a larger story that you're trying to tell. Digital skills are not important in and of themselves, right? Nobody wakes up in the morning, and very few people wake up in the morning and say, gosh, I'd really like to learn Python, right? They wake up and say, I want to help my kids with their homework. They wake up and say, I need to get a better job. They wake up and say, oh, my boss said I need to learn this thing so that I can be promoted, right? They wake up and say, I live in a rural community and I really need mental health care and there's not a therapist near me, but I heard that telehealth can help, right? And so digital skills are a tool that can help people get to the dreams and the aspirations they have. And all of you know way better than I do what those dreams and aspirations look like for the people in your communities and the people that you're serving. North Carolina is the only state in the country that has as many local digital equity plans as far along as all of you do. That is an amazing achievement, right? And it's one of the reasons that we picked North Carolina as one of only 2 states that we highlighted in this report. The other reason was you all have a really diverse economy, and it was a nice illustration of something that other states could also look at and say, oh yeah, we have an ag sector, we have an advanced manufacturing sector, we have a research sector, And so, when I think about all of you taking this information and running with it, this goes back to Kenny's point, right? I didn't know that his office, that Extension, was trying to hire digital skills educators. But I do know that the information in our report could be great in helping make the justification for why those educators are needed. And so it's really gratifying to hear that it's being used that way. And I hope more folks will just kind of pull whichever nugget is most relevant to their role. And remember, digital skills in the abstract, that's useful to a minority of people who are kind of data geeks like me. Digital skills in service to a dream, an aspiration, a bigger goal that a person or a community has, That's game changing.
Thank you. I do want to follow up on something you mentioned in your presentation about making sure that folks are aligning with the BEAD grants. So just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that there will be another round of funding from the Office of Digital Equity and Literacy for nonprofits and local governments and regional governments to apply for up to $400,000 projects. And you would not be competing with someone in your same organization type. So you wouldn't be competing like you would be competing. So you would not be, a COG would not be competing with a local government, is what I mean. Once that round is open, we'll make sure that we share that information through our newsletter and on our website. Michelle, if someone from NC State is on the call and wants to be involved in your project, how best can they get involved and how best could they help further the work in their own offices?
Wonderful. If you would like to be involved, I believe Kylie shared our website. We have a website. It's connected to Staff Senate under our initiatives. It's the Digital Inclusion and Access Initiative. You can contact me. We have other opportunities through our computer loan project that we could hook you up with. And as far as helping in your own unit. One of the things that I've learned through this process is just to listen to people, to ask them where they are and listen. Because we have a lot of people who are active learners, they may not have the opportunity. And so listen to what they tell you and where they are. And you might find you have a champion right there in your midst. They just want to learn and then they want to turn around and help the next person. And so I think that's really the very best thing I could say.
Thank you. So we did have a question from the group from William Setterberg. He says that over the years, he's worked with the Georgetown Center on Education and Workforce, plus the state is working on career pathways. What is your strategy for incorporating digital skills into the efforts to define certificates and degrees? I think this would be to Amanda. What have you seen?
Yeah, so there's three different trends that are happening. So the first trend is kind of the most obvious, and I hope it will affirm things that folks are already working on, which is our research has found that digital skills are learned best if you learn them in the context of the real world way you're going to use them. So if you're in a career pathway at a community and technical college to become a phlebotomist and draw blood at the doctor's office, or you're going to become an HVAC technician, we hope that you're not enrolled in some random Microsoft Office class off over here, right? We hope that you're learning digital skills that are relevant for the healthcare industry or the HVAC industry as part of your technical skills training, right? So that's a good practice. So the first step on certificates and sort of indications of skill is, are the existing degree and certificate programs adapting to incorporate industry-specific digital skills as part of their curriculum and part of their credentials that folks are earning. And again, sounds like common sense. You'd be surprised. There are some parts of the country where folks are kind of still getting shunted off into kind of generic office software classes when that's really not what's helpful or useful to them. So that's the first and easiest step. The second step is, look, there are 938,000 different kinds of credentials in this country. Degrees, certificates, certifications, badges, mini badges. We could go on and on all day, right? And there's a nonprofit called Credential Engine that has a website called Credential Finder that lets you look up different credentials. The problem is no employer and no state government agency has the time to go through a list of 938,000 credentials, right? And so what we are seeing is an effort right now to figure out, okay, which one of these has meaning in the labor market? Which one, if I'm a hiring manager and I see it on somebody's resume, I care about whether folks have it. And this is where employer engagement becomes really important. And this is something that I know that your higher education folks are already working on, but your workforce development system, we interviewed the Nashville Chamber of Commerce last year, and they said, look, Google came to town and they were all excited about the Google career certificates. And we surveyed our employer partners to say, hey, if somebody applies to you and has this on your resume, do you care? Do you notice? Do you know what it means? And the input they got from their employer partners was, okay, here are the roles that we think that this certificate is relevant for. And we only care if they've gotten the Python programming language add-on to the Google career certificate. And so armed with that information, the chamber could then go back to their education partners and say, okay, if workers are going to enroll in things, don't waste their time on things that local employers aren't looking for. Let's make sure that they're actually earning credentials that we know local employers have a real demand for. So that's the second puzzle piece, is making sure that whatever mechanisms you have for employers to give input are helping to inform the education and career pathways that people are entering into. And then the third thing, I will be very honest and say this is the Wild West right now. And there's a lot of people trying to figure out, here's this vendor and they're marketing their credential and and everybody's got their favorite thing. Nobody has the magic bullet. And everyone's struggling with, how do we make sure that people don't waste their very precious time and money? And in the case of publicly funded student financial aid or workforce training resources, that we're not wasting taxpayer money, sending people off on a wild goose chase for a credential that's not going to have meaning. And this is tricky, right? Because for some skills, there actually aren't good credentials yet, right? So for example, L'Oreal Cosmetics, global cosmetics industry company, Fortune 1000 company, locations all over the globe, thousands of employees in the US. They are leading a digital transformation for folks in the beauty industry. They have career pathways that if you start working in a retail L'Oreal role, selling cosmetics on the shop floor, you can see what digital skills you need to earn to be able to progress to get promoted through the company. Are there good credentials associated with each of those skills? Like, is there a credential for being a beauty vlogger? No, not really, right? And so that's the frustrating part of this work, right? Is it because it is so much the Wild West? There are some things out there that are real digital skills that people really need, but there's no credential associated with it, or nobody agrees on the credential. And some of that is just kind of the reality of where we are at this moment in time.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was really insightful. Helpful. I did not know about L'Oreal. Any other?
Yeah, just Google L'Oreal and digital transformation. You'll be like, my God, who knew the cosmetics companies were doing this?
Yeah, innovative. Any other questions for Michelle or Amanda?
I'd also love to encourage folks to brag. If you're doing something cool or interesting that you're proud of on digital skills, like, it is so valuable for me to hear those examples. So please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A box to share an example if there's something that you all are working on that you're proud of, because that's one of the best ways that I can learn about interesting things going on in different parts of the country.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Anyone from the Rural Center or NC Works Commission want to share what digital skills addressing that divide looks like in your work?
So this is Wendy Johnson with the NC Works Commission. I'm actually the senior workforce analyst. So this has been really informative. I know digital skills has definitely been a conversation. I think it's, I don't know if it was Burning Glass, one of the big report outs did a huge report a few years ago that talked about the digital skills and the human skills that are going to be required in the workforce. So it's definitely something we have a finger on the pulse on, and are really having a huge conversation with our NC Works career centers, because of the virtual needs that we know our customers now and of tomorrow are going to want. We kind of say it's kind of like, if you go to the doctor now, if it's just something basic, the first thing they ask you is, do you want to do it virtually, or do you want to come in? And so those are things we're getting staff comfortable with that capability as well, because there's a lot of things we can help, with resumes, interview questions, things like that really quickly, just doing like what we're doing here, just straight up on Zoom or Microsoft Teams, because it changes up the relationship a little bit, I think, when you can actually see somebody versus just having the phone call. It's like a whole different engagement. And then we hope, of course, that they do come in, or they were probably easier to remember us at that point if that's done digitally. So thank you for that. And thank you for this report.
That is really helpful to know, and I'm so glad that you're asking those questions and thinking about this in this way. The Seattle King County Workforce Development Board actually did a survey of their frontline staff to understand how digital skills, or the lack thereof, were showing up both for staff and for the job seekers that staff were serving. So that survey information is available publicly, and I'm happy to share directly with folks. If you have any trouble finding it, you can drop me an email. My contact information is in today's slides. And then the other example is from New York. There's a nonprofit called the Workforce Professionals Training Institute that realized that, frankly, a lot of frontline workforce center staff in New York City were themselves struggling with digital skills. And so they created a learning community for local workforce development board and workforce center staff to learn together about digital skills in a workforce development context. So the kinds of things that you're talking about in North Carolina are very much on par with those other developments happening in other parts of the country.
Great, thank you, Amanda. I'll Google those and look them up. Thank you.
In the chat, we have something from William Cedarberg, who mentioned that Land of Sky workforce staff, Land of Sky is the cog in Buncombe, Henderson, and Rutherford counties in the western part of the state. They're going to have a summit on artificial intelligence and its impact on workforce needs. The date is tentatively set for May 19th. Will that be an in-person summit, William, or virtual? In person.
Great. Very familiar with Nathan Ramsey and his team at Land of Sky, so thank you.
Great, thank you. And then Kirsten from our staff mentioned that she recently learned about this program between Deutsche Bank, Wake Tech Community College, and Google, and she put the link in there. Have you heard of that, Amanda? Or wait, it's a very local community college, though.
No, it's great. This is exactly the kind of thing I love to learn about, so thank you.
Related to what William mentioned, are you seeing lots of concern around Chat GPT and how things are, you can upskill yourself with digital skills, but then if artificial intelligence can do those skills faster or quicker, what's the plan?
I would say that the discussion around Chat GPT and other forms of large language models and machine learning, there's a lot more speculation and hyperbole right now than there is hard data. So there's a lot of people panicking, thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to eliminate all kinds of jobs. There's a lot of people poo-pooing, saying it's actually not going to eliminate any jobs. But I think if we think about Chat GPT and large language models, the way we've seen many other iterations of technology in our society, it's going to evolve people's jobs, right? Just like those cobots that I talked about. Okay, so your job isn't lifting 40-pound boxes of frozen meat anymore. Now your job is supervising the robot. That's good. That's a good thing.
Right.
I think the scary / unknown part is that any algorithmic process or any large language model is working off of a corpus of material, right? A set of old blog posts and writing things that somebody gathered at some point in time. And like everything else in our world, those things have biases built into them, right? And so some people have done exercises with ChatGPT or something where it says, please tell me what kind of careers my son and daughter could move into. And then ChatGPT writes a beautiful essay about how your son could become a doctor and your daughter could become a nurse. Right? And it's like, there's no shame. I mean, my family are all educators. There's no shame in becoming, a doctor or a nurse or a teacher or this. But if we're assuming that men get to become doctors and women get to become nurses, because that's the set of words that the computer has been trained to associate with those genders, then we are cutting off people's possibilities in their career pathways based on an invisible set of decision making that no human being is even looking at. It's not even like there's a kind of human at the other end going, why are we recommending this career path to these job seekers and this career path to these job seekers? So there are some folks, Dr. Sophia Noble is one, Dr. Ruha Benjamin is another, who are kind of working on the kind of guardrails, the regulatory framework that we're going to need, thinking about AI in the workforce context and in many other contexts. And that, I think, is a really important sort of cautionary thing to be aware of. I talked this week actually to a Canadian entrepreneur who has started a really interesting company and gotten some seed funding from JP Morgan to do career advising. And I said to him, he said, we're kind of a kind of career navigator, a GPS for your job. And I said, that sounds lovely, but how do you know that your GPS is giving people unbiased advice? And he said, well, we're not capturing demographic data, right? So if you come to our website and you're looking for a job, we don't know if you're a man or a woman or how old you are, or what race you are. And secondly, we're also looking at the outputs of our program to make sure that as it's making recommendations, that we're not seeing biases develop in the data in the recommendations that it's making. That's a pretty responsible way to go about this thing. Not everybody's being that responsible. And that, I think, is a concern, right? Because if people just act like it's a black box, it's magic, and the computer made a decision, it's like, humans programmed that computer. And we have to be really conscious of that and really intentional about how we use these tools in the workforce development and digital equity spheres, and not just assume that they're either going to solve everything or they're going to kill everything, because the truth is inevitably going to be somewhere in the middle.
Thank you. That was reassuring for myself too. Good to hear. Michelle or Amanda, any final thoughts before we kind of wrap up with some closing housekeeping?
Thank you for being part of the conversation. I'm delighted to learn about everything that's happening in this space. Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, well, thank you all for joining us today. As usual, we'll be emailing out the resources mentioned today in the chat and a few upcoming opportunities we hope you'll participate in. If you have any digital inclusion events that we should include, please put them in the chat for us to promote. Our newsletter will go out this Friday and we'll be sure to include it. If you've been directly involved in your county or region's digital inclusion planning process, we want to talk to you. We're gathering reflections on the planning process for the state's digital inclusion plan. Kylie will include her email in the follow-up email to help schedule a call with our team. Please send out the AAPI Digital Access Survey. It's due April 28th. The collected data will be used to bridge the digital divide among the AAPI community by informing legislators, policymakers, internet service providers, and other stakeholders. We will include that also in our email. A reminder about the state listening sessions, please sign up for them and share it with your networks. We need to get as many stakeholders involved in the statewide process as possible, because this is what will be sent to the federal government. We're excited about a digital equity survey that's been released and soon will be translated into 6 of North Carolina's top languages. I believe the English version has already been released. This is coming from DIT. The state needs as many partners as possible to share the survey to get the best results. That will also be included in our follow-up. Thank you all for joining us today. If you have any lingering thoughts or questions, please put them in the chat, or feel free to email me or Kylie. We'll put those in the chat as well.